So again, hello everyone. My name is Maxime Lamoureux-St-Hilaire. I am a visiting assistant professor of anthropology at Davidson College, and I am also on the board of director here at the Boundary and Archaeology Research Center. I am delighted to bring to you a famous archaeologist who is one of the foremost scholars in research in both the Olmec and the Toltec worlds, and who has interest in all kinds of other aspects of central Mexican and coastal Mexican archaeology. And this person is Dr. Richard Dick Diehl.
Okay, I'll take it for the next 3 hours or so. Yeah, I'm Dick Diehl. I have been involved in Mexican archaeology for 60 years. I was a student at Penn State under a wonderful man named William Sanders, who was my mentor and friend. I've been involved in archaeology basically since I was 20 years old. I did a major career change in the mid-80s, 1980s. I moved from the University of Missouri to the University of Alabama and became basically a university administrator for the rest of my life and career until I retired in 2006. And that's what presented me with the opportunity to do the La Mojarra project.
And then, of course, this is also what brought you here as our current director of operations. And this is an amazing thing. And here we are, streaming live from the George Stewart Residential Library.
We hope.
We hope it's live. No, I can tell by the green square on the screen that we are live.
Okay.
And so we even have George's National Geographic flag. So this is kind of right there behind me. So please appreciate this beautiful place. And now, what I would like to ask you, Dick, is could you please tell us what brought you to be interested in excavating La Mojarra?
Okay. Well, as I just said, I had a sort of major career change in the 80s. I moved to Alabama, and at the same time, there was an incredible discovery made on the Gulf Coast of Mexico of the what we call La Mojarra Stela 1, the stone that you see Sara La Donde Guevara, Sara, I hope you're out there, pointing to. She was museum director when the monument was installed in the museum in the 1990s. The thing about the La Mojarra Stela is that it has sort of a mysterious background. It was found in a river, the Aquila River, dredged up, actually pulled up, and I'll say more about this in a few minutes, but pulled up from the riverbed, taken to the museum, and everybody knew about the human figure on it. Nobody saw the writing. And once it became apparent that there was a writing, that there was a text on it, the thing was that the text was in an undeciphered script. And that really intrigued me, because by that point in my career, I was kind of interested in the origins of writing in Mesoamerica. And I saw this as an opportunity to do a study at an archaeological site where a known monument had come from in an undeciphered script, in an attempt to maybe find more monuments and have comparative material. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to decipher a script based on one inscription, even one as long as this. And this one has over 500 glyphs in it. So that's what kind of motivated me at first. And I came up on my first sabbatical at University of Alabama. Decided I wanted to study La Mojarra, started talking to George Stewart about it, and he was very enthusiastic. He was the archaeologist at the National Geographic Society, and he helped me acquire National Geographic funding and helped in a variety of ways. So by about 1990, I actually went to La Mojarra with a group of people from the University of Alabama to take a look at the site, and then we went from there. So now the unusual thing about Stela 1 at La Mojarra, if you look at the drawing, and this is the same drawing as is behind Max here, you see a very elaborately dressed individual who we assume was a ruler. Got a really incredible headdress on, shoulder, cape, and so forth. And he is surrounded by one of the longest texts ever found in Mesoamerica. It's in what we call the Ismian Script, which is focused, the finds, the few finds, the 4 of them that we have actually are focused on the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. Some of them have dates on them, carved in what we call the long count calendar and dating system, which put them between about 100 BC and 300 AD. They are always on stone, except for one that's scratched on a piece of pottery. There are only 4 known, and that's a real problem. There has been a proposed decipherment by John Justison and Terence Kaufman, which I'll say more about later, but it's not entirely agreed upon. They argue that they are able to perhaps decipher 80% of it. Some people say they've deciphered 0%. So it's a real question. And is it Mesoamerica's oldest writing system, or are there older ones?
A quick question for you, Dick. Could you tell us, do we know what language is associated with this writing system?
We honestly don't know. The best guess, and this is proposed by Kaufman and Justison, is that it's what we call Proto-Mihe-Soke. That is, it is an ancestor of the modern Mihe and Zoque languages, which are spoken in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. And they use linguistic arguments to support that. Okay.
Should I? No, sorry.
All right. One of the things I want to point out here, if you see the text in the center, well, that's actually written on the side of the stone monument. And it took about 10 years before anybody even noticed it. These glyphs are very faintly carved into the stone. They're very, very hard to see. And of course the question is, next, don't go to sleep at the wheel. Did the guy run out of stone? Did he have to go to the side to finish the text? Did he live through the experience? Did he get sent to central Mexico and as an outcast? Yeah, we don't know what happened. We don't even know. We don't know anything about it. But okay, let's take a look at the origins of writing. There are really 3 places in the world. There are many, many writing systems and many scripts. And in fact, there are many, many more dead writing systems than those in existence today. But there are sort of 3 hearths of writing. Mesopotamia, the ancient Near East, China, and Mesoamerica. And we know that in the case of Mesoamerica, this is an independent invention. That is, it was not based on any knowledge of the existence of writing elsewhere. It's not a copy of something. More specifically, La Mojarra is located in what we call the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, the narrow neck of Mexico, southern Mexico, that connects the major part of the country with Central America and the Yucatan. And here you see the site of La Mojarra is in the flatlands just to the west of the Tuxtla Mountains. The Tuxtla Mountains is that little mountain range, volcanic mountain range that extrudes out into the Gulf of Mexico. More specifically, you look at this map, and I can't point to this, can I? No.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, point to Alvarado if you can, up here. The town of Alvarado is at the mouth of the Papaloapan River, and actually that's the town we stayed in. But to get to La Mojarra, you go into the lagoon and then up a river, the Akula River. It splits into 2. You take the western arm and you follow on up to a little hamlet called La Mojarra. On the right you see a Google map that shows the river and its many bends. And then actually the Valencia Ranch is the heart of the La Mojarra archaeological site. The little village there, you'll notice, if you can, I don't know if you show up, but little white dots, those are houses. People live right along the riverbank. because the river is so important to them, as it was in ancient times. So, if you may have noticed that I pointed out another town called Culebrillas, which is the diminutive in Spanish of culebras. In this case, the culebras, or the snakes, are fertilizers, extremely deadly snakes. They are not little snakes, they are big snakes, they are nasty snakes. They're the kind of snakes you chop to burger bits with a machete if you have an opportunity. Yeah. Okay, so the question is, excuse me, where, when, and why did Mesoamerican writing originate? And we have three possible hearths within Mesoamerica. At the moment, the oldest writing seems to come from the valley of Oaxaca, the mountainous area in southeastern Mexico that today is a major stronghold of Zapotec Indians. They number in the millions, and the Zapotec script is said to be the earliest we have in Mesoamerica. I'm not totally convinced, but this is, here on the left you see a Zapotec carved slab. We call these danzantes because they appear to be dancing. They may be dead. If I were this guy, I'd be dancing too because somebody has just castrated him, and you can see the scrolls of blood rolling down his groin. The important thing here is not his groin, but the glyphs at the upper left. They are very early. We have trouble dating this, but in any case, the second choice, and the one that most archaeologists agree with, would be that it would be Maya writing. And this is the oldest example of a Maya text. The Maya were known for their classic period writing system, but this goes back to the pre-classic or formative, 300 BC, from a place called San Bartolo. The third is the Ismian. And on the right you see this odd duck-shaped green stone with a series of glyphs on the front of it. I'll say more about that in a minute, but yeah. There are a number of spoilers in this story. This object, a Cascajal block, appeared about 15 years ago in a gravel mine, also in the Isthmus, and it has on it glyphs that are not related in any way to the Ismian script. They are earlier. We estimate the age of this stone to be about 800 BC. Many people do not accept it as authentic. They think it's a modern fake. I was involved in the original study of it. I'm convinced that it's authentic. I'm also convinced that it's sort of a one-off thing which didn't lead to anything. And there were probably many of these writing systems that got started and lasted a decade or 100 years, and most of the script, most of the texts were written on perishable materials, and so we'll never know about them. But this is just, it's an oddity at the moment. With regards to the Ismian script, here you can notice on the left you have a close-up of the La Mojarra stela, and you notice these very lightly incised glyphs in columns. On the right is a Tushla statuette in which the glyphs, also in columns, have been emphasized. The Tushla statuette includes a long count date, which you see the bars and dots there, and it's of the same age as the La Mojarra stela. Sometime between, there are two dates on La Mojarra stela, around 150 AD. That's when both of these would date. Okay, once the stela became known that it had glyphs, Fernando Winfield Capitan, who was the director of the museum in Jalapa, the Museo de Antropología de Veracruz, published a monograph that George Stewart published in a series that he personally publishes. In fact, we have these for sale here in his Ancient American series. We don't have a whole lot of them, but it is the basic descriptive source for Stela 1 and its glyphs. And all the drawings were done by George. You see the original behind Max. And so this is sort of the Bible of La Mojarra studies. Back in the early 90s, 1990s, Terry Kaufman and John Justison proposed a decipherment of the glyphs on the front of the monument. This was before the glyphs on the side were known. That has been an issue of contention ever since. I can't take a stance on this because I'm not an epigrapher. I don't know. This is not my game. My job, as I see it, is to find new texts for people like John and Terry and Steve Houston and Carl Talbot to study. One of the things that really upsets me, this is the Science magazine cover. And as a PR move, they painted the glyphs for the cover. We have no evidence that the original glyphs were painted or they were painted this color. And at first it really upset me when I saw this. I thought it was a scientific fraud. But I realize now, most of these ancient monuments were undoubtedly painted. I firmly believe that. We have yet to confirm it. And I'm looking forward to someone doing that someday for monuments of all ages in Mesoamerica. I believe they were painted, but I don't believe they were necessarily painted these colors. So, okay, so
let's take a second here.
Yeah.
So this is very interesting, and so now we've learned a little bit about the La Mojarra Stela, about the context of its study, which I guess is now over 30 years old. Now, this is obviously what attracted your attention to this site of La Mojarra. I think, and made you create dreams of glory, right? Mm-hmm. And led you to excavate there. Now, can you please tell us a bit more about this process, this archaeological process, which you undertook to do research at La Mojarra?
Okay. Yeah. I'll be delighted to. Most of the public don't have really a good idea of what goes into an archaeological project and what is behind the finds that you read about in the daily news. For example, just last evening I read about an archaeological project in Belgium on the World War I battlefield of Ypres, the Second Battle of Ypres, in which tens of thousands of men were killed in a 24-hour period. There have been intensive archaeological studies recently that have revealed a lot about it, but I can't find anything on how the project started. Okay, all archaeological projects have four basic stages. There's a conception in which the archaeologist or a group of archaeologists put together an idea of what is important in their field and how they might approach it, how they would study it. For example, how do you study the origins of writing? Well, you have to find examples of writing. So that's, and so you conceive of a project that would allow you to find new examples. The second step is preparation to get ready to do the research. And that frequently takes a lot longer than the research itself. Third, and not finally, the execution. And this is what most people think about when they talk about archaeology. You go into the field, you dig, you walk, you do survey, and you do all of the things that you saw Indiana Jones not do. You also do laboratory study, and that generally will take, you can generally figure it'll take 3 months in the lab for every month in the field. It's a long process, and it's at times a boring process, but it's absolutely essential. And then finally, the aftermath, preparation of manuscripts and the publication. And if you don't do step 4, you're not doing archaeology, because if you go through the first 3 steps and don't make your results available to the profession, to your fellow archaeologists, and to the public, you have failed in your endeavor. You've just indulged in navel gazing and your own pleasure seeking. So those are the 4 steps all projects go through. So let me lead you through the steps that I went through with the La Mojarra project. My objective was to locate additional monuments with inscribed texts, because I believe, and I still do, that it's impossible, and Terry and John would disagree with me on this, but it's impossible to decipher a text unless you have comparative material, independent instances of writing in which you can compare glyphs and sets of glyphs. Okay, so my research design. Well, what do we need to do? To go to La Mojarra and find additional monuments. Well, any archaeological project has to involve the preparation of a site map. You have to know where you are on the ground. You have to know what the remains are. You also have to go through step B, which is establishing a site stratigraphy and chronology. You have to have a sense not only of the surface, but of the soil changes and the finds that are below the ground. And you have to know the dates, both the relative dates and the absolute dates, C14 dating, whatever. You have to develop, you have to put that site in place and time. And then in my case, my next step was to conduct a subsurface prospection using various geoarchaeological instruments. And since I'm not an expert in that, I hired the experts, a team from Mexico's National Autonomous University. The next step would be to locate and excavate monuments. And then in my own mind, and I never included this in the proposal or anything, I was going to become world famous. And I was going to get elected into the National Academies of Science, which is the premier science organization in the United States. And I figured I'd get, a doubling of my salary at Alabama, and I mean, it was going to be the Big Rock Candy Mountain. So, okay. Now, the next step, when you get back from the Big Rock Candy Mountain, is you have to get funding for your project. In this case, I went to the National Geographic Society, and various universities helped as well, and I'll explain that in a moment. And then step 3, Max is asleep at the wheel here, is to assemble a staff. Nobody can do a project by themselves. Nobody ever did. So I did assemble a staff, and I'm going to go through these steps in more detail right now. Funding. National Geographic Society gave me $30,000 to go to Mexico and to run a La Mojarra project for 6 months. And George Stewart, who's in the lower left, was at that point the vice president for exploration and research at the society, as well as being the archaeologist. And although he helped, he had to convince his colleagues that I was worthy of support, and fortunately they did. We also had support from the University of Veracruz and the University of Alabama. The grant money came from Geographic. Both universities gave me and my collaborator, Sergio Vasquez, time off from our teaching duties. University of Alabama kicked in a vehicle. The University of Veracruz kicked in a boat. Both of them provided students, and the University of Veracruz provided laboratory space. So it was a truly international project. These were my collaborators, Sergio Vasquez on the left, an archaeologist with great experience on the Gulf Coast, and he's still very active today. On the right, Dr. Louise Barba from Mexico's National Autonomous University. He's a geoarchaeologist, and he brought a team along with their equipment to look for hot spots where we might find stone monuments. The student team included the people you see seated here, on our pool. Now let me say something about this pool. We rented a house, had a swimming pool in the back, and we thought, man, Alvarado is a really hot place, and we thought this swimming pool was going to be really the thing. Well, we were never able to fill it with water, and in fact, it only had about 6 inches of water covered with scum for the whole time we were there. I want to do a shout out. You see the bottom name there, and I don't know how to do Spanish letters on PowerPoint, so it's Doña Chole Matadamas. She was our cook, and man, I want to tell you, she did one hell of a good job. Yeah. All right, January 1995. Clete Rooney, the only student from the University of Alabama, and I take off from Tuscaloosa, and we do this road trip, It's my 17th and last road trip to Mexico in my life. I look forward to doing another one sometime, but you know, those are years that I hear creeping up in the back of me. Anyways, we drove all the way down to Alvarado, stopping off in Jalapa to pick up people and equipment and stuff. Transportation needs for the project were provided by both universities. University of Alabama loaned me, rented me, let's be honest, rented me at a reduced rate, this 1993 Chevy Suburban, which was a great field vehicle, except when the air conditioning died, and except when the fuel filter got clogged and the engine wouldn't run. And then when the brakes failed going down the mountains and I had a downshift in the low and four-wheel drive and put into the low gearbox because the brakes didn't work. But other than that, it was a good vehicle. University of Veracruz came up with this boat that worked fine. And there you see the boat with our motorista, Bernardo, who was the boat driver. You also see our pig, our party pig. We took him to the party at the end of the field season. We ate him, but okay. And this was where we lived. Ilustre, heroica y generosa ciudad y puerto de Alvarado, Veracruz. The illustrious, heroic, and generous city and port of Alvarado, Veracruz. A place that's known for having the foulest mouthed people in Mexico. And that's another story. They are also extremely generous, lovely people. Living in Alvarado was a dream. It truly was. The city was founded in 1518. So if you think that where you're living here in the United States has some history, look south. On the right is the plaza where we'd sometimes go down after dinner, walk around, help learn the local store owners put together his jigsaw puzzle, which he did every night out in front of his ice cream stand. And we just enjoyed living there. Alvarado is known for its music, particularly its jarocho music. Guitars, harps, requintas, a variety of stringed instruments, wapango dancing. I've lived with this stuff all my adult life and I love it. Unfortunately, during the 1995 field season, we spent a lot more time in the discotheques because the young ladies who were on the project needed an escort, and somehow they figured out I was a good male escort. And so I'd end up spending Friday and Saturday nights in the disco. What is the region like? Well, on the left you see what it would look like if people had not cut off as much of the vegetation as they have. This is one of the last stands of original vegetation. It's an area of lagoons, rivers, mangrove swamps. You see mangrove on the right there. Extremely productive ecosystem. Believe me, there are lots of fish and aquatic life in there. This is a rich, rich area. There are also lots of mosquitoes, and it's hot, and it's buggy, and it's this, that, and the other, and you just get used to it. People have been living there for tens of thousands a year, 10,000 years. If you go upriver, you see everybody lives by the river bank. Here on the left is a typical house made out of concrete block, plastered and painted. On the right is a fairly common sight, an evangelical temple. Evangelical religions have made a real inroad into the area. You also see people fishing. Here's a young boy with a throw net. He's going to get dinner. And people eat a lot of fish, and they're very well fed, and no, there are no nutritional deficiencies or anything of that sort. On the right is a school where he's supposed to be sitting in classroom when he's out there fishing, but that's another story. Okay, so we get to the site. We've made previous arrangements. Bienvenidos otra vez, compañeros. Yeah, we were at this place. On the right, you see the topographic map that is the result of all of the work that Sergio and Alfredo did. And what you notice is there are clumps of contour lines. Those are ancient mounds, earth mounds. We did not excavate any of them because that was not our intent or part of our project. But if you look closely, in the upper left, you will see the river. And you'll see the spot where Stela 1 was found in the river. You'll also see in the middle of the picture a place that says Kilns and Plaza. That's where we ended up doing the majority of our excavations. So okay. In order to achieve the first goal, we did a number of test pits in various parts of the site. We actually started one, and here you see the students digging out an existing hole that had been dug by the local ranch owner. We figured we could take advantage of that and see what the soil conditions were like and what the profile looked like, what soil we had to deal with, and how deep it was, for example. What might we find in it? It was not really a controlled excavation. On the right, we've got a controlled excavation going under Cleet Rooney's direction, and there's Cleet. After a certain depth, it gets really difficult to do an entire 2 by 2 meter square. So Cleet cut it down to a 1 by 2, and it kept going down and down and down. The only problem is we didn't find anything. Yeah, on the left there you see a very disgruntled looking Cleet who's just dug that beautiful pit and found nothing. On the right are the ladies from the University of Veracruz who are also doing a pit, and they didn't find anything. I'm not going to translate what they said. Okay, one of the things we wanted to do was see if there were any additional monuments where the original monument had been found. So how do we know where the original monument had been found? Well, on the left you see those posts. They were actually put in by the engineers who lifted the monument off the riverbed and ultimately took it to the museum. So we went out there on our boat, and it's not very deep, it's only about waist deep, depending on the tides, because tidal action does come up this far upriver. And we poked around and probed around and tried some underwater archaeology, didn't find anything. So that didn't work. Fortunately, no, go back if you...
Yeah, that's it.
All right, yeah. Fortunately, the scientific team, the geoarchaeological team from the National University showed up to do it the right way. And they showed up with all of this equipment. I mean, my students and I were flabbergasted. I had never seen a solar panel battery, which is what you see in the foreground here. This was 1995, and the computer revolution was just taking off. On the right, you see one of the team, Augustine, with a gradiometer. Sounds impressive, looks impressive, was impressive. So they started doing their work. On the left, you see Paco Link, the other member of the team, systematically walking across the site with a magnetometer. Magnetometers detect anomalies. And in this situation, anomalies, this is a river floodplain, you would not normally find stone. Stone is magnetic. Any magnetic object in the ground would register on the magnetometer. That was my thinking. That was their thinking too. So they walk back and forth. There you see Dr. Louise Barba, and if you have really sharp eyes, you'll notice that he has his pants tucked into his socks. Socks with the red lines around them. Why would you do that? Well, because this is a cattle pasture and it's loaded with ticks. And this is one way to keep the ticks from crawling up your leg until they get to a place where your legs end, and then they just stay there. Anyways, as a result of the magnetometer survey, we end up with a map that you see on the right. And the blue spots are hot spots. They are places of high magnetic anomalies. And one's right in the middle of the plaza, and we figured, boy, that's it. That's where the monuments are going to be. So just about that time, we're coming up on Easter vacation, so we take a break for a week, as everyone does in Mexico, Semana Santa. You go off for a week and take a week's rest and vacation. I came back to Washington, D.C., where I was living for 2 years, me and my wife Sue, and I was so sure that that blue spot meant that there were going to be monuments that I bought a very expensive bottle of brandy to take back to Mexico to celebrate when we found the monument. Now, during all of this, daily life goes on. You're living 6 months, 5 months, 6 months in a Mexican town. You are doing a lot more than archaeology. We're going up and down river every day. Every morning we had to go up river from Alvarado to La Mojarra. It was about a 45-minute ride up, about a 30-minute ride down because you had to, the current going with you. And we do things like give people rides. Here is she's a local third-grade teacher. And she latched on to a Mexican archaeologist who was there part of the time, Beto Luna Gomez, and she's giving him all sorts of hell for his bad way of living. Ironically, at this very time, right now, Beto is giving a webinar in Mexico from a city called Cordoba in Veracruz at the same time that I am. And actually, we emailed back and forth and suggested that we do guest appearances in each other's show. But we can't even keep our own show.
We wish him more luck with his technicalities.
Yeah. Well, what else do we do? Well, we help the ranchers drive their cattle across the river. That's our boat. I didn't know cattle could swim, but they can. I mean, that river's much deeper. They weren't walking across. And then on the weekends, we have things to do. We have to go into Veracruz to buy things. We go to Sam's Club, which is a source of almost anything you want. This particular Sam's Club even carried grits. I can't imagine why anybody in Mexico would want grits, but that's another story. One of our biggest purchases was down in the lower left, milk. I was never so embarrassed in my life because all the archaeological projects I've ever directed, we always bought much more beer than anything else on the food list, and then we'd have to hide the expenditures, come up with false receipts. My crew drank a lot of milk and no beer, and I had to submit these receipts to the National Geographic for all this milk. Anyways, we'd also stop at Denny's for breakfast. There's nothing like a good stick-to-your-ribs, high carbohydrate, high cholesterol breakfast to get you going. And then later in the day, we might go into downtown Veracruz and go to the world-famous Café La Parroquia, where they mix coffee and hot milk. And here you see the waiter pouring the milk. These guys are trained to do this. If you're ever within 1,000 miles of Veracruz City, go to La Parroquia. You'll never regret it. Or we might take an afternoon or an evening off and go over to the town of Tlacotalpan, my very favorite town in this whole part of the world. Hot. It's right on the banks of the Papaloapan River. It is a UNESCO heritage site because of its colonial architecture, which you see from the air. It is also renowned, well, it's renowned for its jarocho music, but for its food. And man, you go to Tlacotalpan, you can eat good anywhere, even in the plaza. So we get back on the site, come back after Easter, and Alfredo takes charge of the excavations in the plaza. Starts going down, and even within the first 10 centimeters, he starts finding a lot of pottery, but it's weird pottery. It's broken pieces, and they were misfired. Some of them were fired at such high temperatures that they were almost vitrified. And the pots broke in the firing process. Well, that was the first indication that we were coming down on a ceramic kiln, or kill, a place where pottery had been fired. There were actually 3 of them in the plaza. We left 2 of them alone after realizing what they were. We focused on one. We started excavating it. And it was one of the real oddities of Veracruz archaeology. After the kiln had been abandoned, it had been very carefully packed with broken pieces of stucco from nearby architecture, the walls off of buildings that had been earth buildings, had stucco facings, sometimes with paint on them, and they had been broken off and very, not just dumped into the kiln, but very carefully placed in horizontal layers. I don't have an explanation for it. I mean, 25 years later, I'm as baffled as I was back then. But that's what it looked like as we were excavating down on it. This is the final excavation. There's Alfredo standing next to his thesis, because this became his thesis. He did an excellent job. You can see the various components in it. And on the right is a profile drawing of it. What we're looking at basically is just the bottom. The top, the walls and the top, if indeed it had a top. It may have been perishable material. But they collapsed over the years. Cattle tramping in the area have messed everything up in the top 15, 20 centimeters. But this is a kiln. And as the Rolling Stones said, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try hard enough, you get what you need. Anyway, save me, Max. All right, what else did we find on the site? Well, pottery, but not much of it. But these are the kinds of things that would have been fired in the kilns. On the left, you see a flat bottom bowl that might have been an eating bowl. In the center, there's what was probably a jar, given the relative angle of the bottom. On the right there is a jar lip and the side of it. You see drawings of a couple, in fact these are all the figurine fragments that we found. In general, the site of La Mojarra has less pottery on it than any archaeological site I've ever seen in Mexico. And I don't know why. I suspect people were using a lot of baskets and gourds, from gourd trees for containers and wooden containers. One thing we did not find, but which is now in the museum in Jalapa, is this hollow ceramic sculpture, which may well have been fired in one of those kilns. It was found at La Mojarra, given to the museum by the local ranchers, and it's been reassembled. This was after we were there. It's missing the head, but it's a little less than life size. And these are real, this is a rather poor example of it, but there's some magnificent pieces of art from this area of life-size and almost life-size ceramic sculptures of humans and animals. Let's get back to kilns for a minute. Traditionally, there are two ways of firing pottery in ancient Mesoamerica, and pottery was extremely important because people used pots for so many different things in their daily lives. The first method was just firing it on the ground, laying it on firewood and then covering it with flammable material, setting it on fire, and cooking the pottery that way. A more elaborate way is to build a kiln. You see on the right, this takes quite a bit of firewood, and it's a fairly elaborate structure. Here you see one that's complete. I don't know if ours at La Mojarra would have had domed roofs like that or not. I rather doubt it. I suspect that they were maybe flammable material, but we don't know. You see our kiln on the left. On the right you see one that Christopher Poole of the University of Kentucky excavated a nearby community called Juniper de Albajo. I love that name. It just rolls off the tongue. The Tuxtla Mountain area, including the lowlands around it, have an amazing number of ceramic kilns, many more than most other parts of Mesoamerica. I don't know why, but kiln technology is quite ancient in this area and seems to have been quite prevalent, at least compared with other parts of ancient Mesoamerica that we know about. So, well, kilns are important, but they don't get Dick Diehl in the National Academy of Sciences. They don't even let me in the front door. Nevertheless, I'm quite happy to have found kilns and to have excavated one. We only excavated 25% of it. We left the rest for future archaeologists. People may come along with better techniques, more refined approaches. They can excavate that. There are 2 other kilns that are there awaiting future archaeologists. You should never dig anything in its entirety because you know that your successors are going to have better techniques and better ideas and be better in general than you are. You're going to be the pioneer, and you get credit for that. Doesn't mean you necessarily get it right. And the only solace I have is that, yes, Sergio, óyeme, compadre, nuestro proyecto sí era muy fructuoso. Our project was a real success. And as William Faulkner said, all of us failed to match our dreams of perfection. And you can read the rest. I'm happy. This is one of the this project was a high point in my life, and I look back on it with a lot of pride and pleasure. Okay, comes the end of the field season. It's May. It is hotter than the hinges of you know where. It's time to wind down. We're running out of money. In fact, Cleet and I ran out of money about 100 miles south of the border, and fortunately had enough gas in the tank to get into Brownsville. So you have a party. The pig's invited. The pig is a star. There's no milk anywhere. It's all beer. And everyone has a good time. You invite all the crew. You invite the neighbors. You invite everybody. People come from Jalapa, archaeology students. And then we learn that our workers are excellent musicians. They bring out their guitars and they start playing and singing. And of course, the more beer we drink, the better they sound. So, all right, let's get back to the Ismian Script, because we didn't find any monuments. So we haven't made a contribution to it. Well, since 1995, only one additional text has come to light. And it is on the back of a mask in the Teotihuacan style, which would date it to somewhere around 200 to 250, I'm guessing, AD. And it was looted. We don't know where from. We don't know where in Mexico this came from. It's in a private collection. Michael Coe was able to photograph it, and in the back is a rather lengthy inscription in the Ismian Script, which, according to Michael Coe and Steve Houston, disprove the decipherment proposed by Justison and Kaufman. Where does this argument lie? I don't know. That this is not what I do. How do we get more text to lead to a decipherment? Well, we don't do it the way I did it. I don't think that's going to work, frankly. Not because it didn't work for me, but as I look back on it, it's not going to work anywhere where you purposely go looking for something as rare as a monument with an inscription on it. Next. Oh, sorry. And I realize now every important example of the Ismian Script lacks an archaeological context. What I mean by that is none of them have been found by archaeologists in place where we can date them by the associated layers or by charcoal, where we know how they relate to buildings, plaza floors, and so forth. Even the La Mojarra stela was found in a river. Incidentally, local people tell us that the La Mojarra stela, back in their grandparents' day, was standing upright in the river bank, and that erosion carried it into the river. And they knew all along it was there. So, given that kind of reality, I'm just convinced that new discoveries will be serendipitous things. There'll be some road building going on, and a bulldozer will nick a monument. There'll be house construction. Some farmer's going to do plowing, or somebody's going to be excavating to create a fish tank or an alligator tank. They actually raise farm-raised alligators in this area. Or it's going to be some looter, maybe doing it intentionally, maybe looking for antiquities, or just coming across it and selling it to an antiquities dealer. In other words, it may have happened a year ago and we don't know about it. It may happen today. It may not happen for the next 30 years. And that is the reality. Okay, so what happened to me after I didn't get elected in the National Academy of Sciences? So I go back to the University of Alabama, kind of crestfallen a bit, but then the dean asked me if I would like to be the acting director of the University of Alabama School of Music. And I said, why, sure. Why not? And I did that for a year, and it was a marvelous year. It was a tough year in some ways, but it was one of the most enjoyable years of my life. That only lasted a year because I was taking over while they were searching for a permanent director, and I'm not a musician, anyways, after that, I became the acting director of the University of Alabama Museums because there had been a search that had failed, and so the provost asked me to step in. And I ultimately decided to do that for the next 6 years. And I was executive director of 4 of the, not all the museums on campus. They didn't give me the Paul Bryant Museum, the football museum. They knew better than that. But I had the Museum of Natural History up on the left, Moundville Archaeological Park on the lower left, the Gorgas House, which is a marvelous historic home, the oldest building on the University of Alabama campus, and the Office of Archaeological Research, which is the curation center for Alabama archaeology. I was in charge of those 4 operations. Another completely different challenge, but nevertheless a lot of fun. I retired in 2006, continued teaching for a while. Today I'm here at Boundary Inn Archaeological Research Center. My wife Nancy and I are here for the year. Actually, we're going to stay for 2 years, helping to get the place up and running, organize the library, paint the deck, do whatever we can to help Boundary Inn achieve its goals.
And then I'll take on for a second.
Yeah.
The Boundary Inn Center is really incredibly lucky to have you here, Dick, because you really have been bringing so much energy and contributions to this library.
Thank you.
And I really hope that with you and our next visiting scholars, we're really going to be able to reach new boundaries.
Yeah.
And though,
we're at Boundary Inn.
But exactly.
We're at the foot of the Pisgah National Forest.
It's pretty good. In this photo, you can see the mountains that we're seeing from our windows right now. It's truly a wonderful place to be. But there are lots of challenges.
Yes.
There are lots of challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me. What did we learn? We jumped ahead, but don't worry, we'll catch up. What did we learn in this project? Well, we learned a lot of basic information about an archaeological site that had never been studied. Barbara Stark had first located this site in the 1970s on a survey, but I think it's one of the major centers in that region during the Classic period. So it helps us fill in the archaeological record. It gave us quite a bit of information on pottery manufacturing, which was an important craft in this area. And yet on the site itself, we find hardly no pottery. That's a conundrum. But ceramic technology is an area we need to learn a lot more about in Mesoamerica, ancient Mesoamerica, and this helped. We obviously learned that it's not going to be easy to find monuments with scripts of any sort. We did everything by the book. We did everything right, and we came up wrong. And that's a worthwhile lesson in itself. Finally, I think we learned that science, like all human endeavors, absolutely requires international cooperation, collaboration. And it has to be on a very personal level. It cannot just sort of be institution to institution. This has to be person to person. And that's what makes the life of an archaeologist who works in other parts of the world so rich. It certainly enriched my life over the last 60 years. I don't speak Spanish fluently, but I speak it floridly. And I enjoy life in Mexico as much as I enjoy life in the United States. Doing Mexican archaeology, I have something else that I say, but I won't say it in mixed audiences. Doing Mexican archaeology is better than counting blankets at the U.S. Army Depot in Lackawanna, Pennsylvania. And actually, the only job that I got accepted for after I got my bachelor's degree at Penn State as a history major was as a civil servant in the Lackawanna Army Depot. I don't know if they were going to make me count blankets or not, but I can only imagine. So, okay, this is the whole crew. This is the end of the dig party. Gracias a todos ustedes veracruzanos, jarochos, mojarreños. Thank you all for being such an important part of my life. And I wish you all the best. Quédense sanos, eh? El virus está pegando fuerte allá, tanto como aquí. Y tomen vino. Never mind that. All right, now is the time to get out your credit card and your checkbook. And we're going to tell you what to do with it right now. You see that image on the screen? That gives you all the information. As Max has said earlier, here at Boundary End, we're building programs to support scholars in their research in ancient Americas. We have big plans for the future for the center. Man, I have plans. I'd love to turn this into the School for Advanced Research of the East. That's not going to happen, but we need money. We have needs for renovation of the buildings, financial support for residential scholars. Your donations go a long way to helping us achieve these goals, and any amount you can give helps. If you'd like to donate, there's a link on the page there, or you can just go to boundaryend.com, and we'll take cash, we'll take any known currency, Bitcoin, we'll do it. And I want to thank you all for putting up with all the inconveniences, the technical glitches, the unprepared for intermission. And I don't know if we're going into a question and answer period. I hope so.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to just announce this first? Yeah.
Yeah, one last thing. I want to invite you on July 24th to the virtual screening of a documentary called Land and Water Revisited, which is put out by Empty Bottle Productions. This is a very special thing. This is a documentary about how life has changed in the Teotihuacan Valley, east of Mexico City, in the last 60 years, since 1962. It's very important to me personally. I've been involved in it peripherally, but in 1961, I started my career as an anthropologist in the Teotihuacan Valley. And I lived there for 4 years in the 60s. It has changed since then, and that's what this is about. My professor Bill Sanders made a movie in 1962 that documented farming and living conditions in the valley. Today, Kirk French and his group of documentary filmmakers have put together a movie which will screen worldwide, its English version, on July 24th. Please join us.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dick, for this talk.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to offer the opportunity, assuming that our internet allows us to continue streaming, for anyone who has questions to ask them in the chat function of our YouTube live channel, and our colleague and our colleague Matt will be communicating these questions to us, and then we'll see if they can answer.
Okay. Question is, I'm curious to ask you, why did your project not excavate the actual mound of
Okay.
Okay.
So the question is, why did you decide not to excavate the mounds, and why did you focus on the plaza?
Okay, several reasons. I did not assume that I would find a stone monument inside a mound. Now, that may be a false assumption. Perhaps one was buried during a later construction phase. However, we did do the geophysical survey over the mounds, and they did not have any anomalies in them. So it's unlikely that there are monuments. Furthermore, we had a very small project and a limited budget. We did not have the resources to excavate one of those mounds. And if we had planned on excavating one, we would have needed permission from the Mexican government to do that specifically. We had permission that allowed us to look for monuments and dig test pits and map. And you know, as an archaeologist, you just can't go to Mexico and dig up wherever you feel like going. You need permission from the National Institute of Anthropology and History. My permit, I did not ask for permission because I just didn't see it fitting into my research design. If there were other questions, if I were to go back to La Mojarra, that is one of the things I would want to do. I would want to excavate at least a portion of one of those mounds to get a construction history, see how it ties into the plaza, and where is the source of that stucco that we found so carefully packed in the kilns.